no. Did you see the game? Did you see the game? Did you see the game? When the assistant coach went over to the coach, he said something to him. The coach won that game. The assistant coach that went over there, the coaching staff was something else. What a game! I can't wait to see that coach and talk to the staff. What a game! You should have been there. Welcome to the show known as Conversations with Ralph Walker. You know that fall time of year when that great sport emerges? You know what I'm talking about. Well, you might think baseball initially, but that's usually the World Series. But then the NFL comes to town, the big boys. Then you have to tell your wife, I got to dominate the TV, I'm sorry. And then all of a sudden the season moves so fast, and the next thing you know is playoff time. And then it's the quest for the Super Bowl. Who are the players that play a major role in all of this? We know the big names, the stars. We know the head coaches. But what about those assistant coaches that play such an integral role in this chess game, in the battle of inches? Well, guess what? I'm honored to have here in the studio Coach Wayne Nunnely. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great.
All right. Now, to some of the viewers out there, they might say that name sounds sort of familiar. If you're a Monrovian, you might say, didn't this guy used to play football at Monrovia High?
Exactly. I grew up right here in Monrovia and went through the school system, and this is still home for me.
All right. What team did you play on?
I played at Monrovia High. I actually started playing varsity football my sophomore year in high school. And then I played for 3 years on the varsity.
Who was the coach?
Dick Robbins was the coach the whole time I was at Monrovia High, and actually way before I even came into high school.
What was the season like?
My junior year, we won the Pacific League Conference that year and had a good football team. We had a lot of talent on that team.
Okay, what position did you play?
I was a fullback on offense and a defensive end on defense, played both ways.
So what made you get into football?
Loved football ever since, I almost want to say since I was born.
Okay.
I mean, when I was a young kid, I started off in elementary school at Huntington Elementary School. And we would play on Saturdays, just the kids in the neighborhood, and we played tackle football.
The old sandlight style.
That's it, loved it.
Okay.
So I knew that's what I wanted to do.
No equipment and nothing on.
Nothing.
Yeah, back in my days in Chicago, I can
Exactly.
reflect on that.
Yeah.
Now, what did you gain from the coach, or what did you say the coach's name was?
Dick Robbins.
Dick Robbins. What did you learn from him as a coach? What type of coach was he?
Coach Robbins was,
Was he old school, disciplinary?
He was old school. Now,
style?
everything was old school when I was a kid.
Okay.
You know, so he was a very good coach. I mean, he was one of those kind of guys that you could relate to. And I think that's important. Being a coach, you got to be able to relate to your players, respect him. He was one of those guys that was good with the X's and O's, but he also had that ability to communicate with the players, and that's what I really enjoyed about him.
What would be an example that you could still recall about that coach?
I could remember in a tough battle that we had against Arcadia High School, who was our rivalry.
Oh.
And Coach, we were behind going into the fourth quarter. The whole game, you could tell that Coach Robbins was under control. He never really lost his temper, never lost his composure, and it was a tight game. He made some calls that ended up working out well for us, and we ended up beating Arcadia that year 7-6. That's how close it was.
What a game!
Yes, it was, and I kicked the winning PAT for that game. So that one I'll always remember.
So defensive end and fullback. And a kicker.
And well, just my senior year.
Doesn't matter. It's still on the resume, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
How did you deal with that pressure?
You learn, I think, as a player, first, how to deal with pressure. And it just carried on over into coaching, except...
No, wait, let's back it up.
Okay.
Dealing with pressure on the field.
On the field.
Is one thing.
Yeah.
And then you have pressures of life. But when you're in a game and everyone is, and at that age, what are you thinking? I just got to make this kick.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things, and again, let me explain this. I became our full-time kicker about halfway through the season. Our kicker got injured.
Okay.
He was out for the rest of the year. We had tryouts. I did the best and able to kick the ball between the poles. So it was something new for me, and it was pressure.
Which is unusual for African-American males in football to be considered a kicker.
Exactly. And it happened, it only happened because this guy got hurt.
Right.
And he had a tryout to see who could kick because we didn't have anybody else.
Okay.
And I was the most consistent in kicking the ball over the goalpost.
So you're the one.
That's how I got it. And that particular game, it was pressure, but I just had confidence that I could do it. You know, it's just one of those things that I had confidence in my ability to do it.
So you kick it and the crowd goes crazy.
And goes crazy, the team goes crazy, everybody goes crazy. And that's one of the things that you remember the rest of your life. And that's why I brought it up, because that's something I will remember my rest of my life, is that particular game under pressure.
Arcadia's still talking about it. Just like you are.
Yeah.
All right, now as you move on, high school. After high school, what did you aspire to go on to college? Did you?
Yes, I actually I had a good senior year. Had a lot of schools recruiting me and that kind of stuff. I had only one drawback. I was a poor student, and I look back on those years, and it's probably the thing that I learned more later on in life, how important getting an education was.
So you're saying academically?
Academically, I wasn't good enough.
Okay. Do you think that you were allowed to skirt past certain classes because you were an athlete?
No, I was doing good enough to pass my classes.
Right.
But it wasn't good enough for NCAA to be able to get a scholarship to a university.
So the same effort that you put on the field, you didn't put in the book.
I didn't put on it. I found out later, and that's why I ended up being a college graduate. And I found out if I put the time into studying, and instead of clowning around, I could get the work done. And I ended up really good student at my end of my college career. I was voted, I was a physical education major, I wanted to be a coach, and I was voted the most outstanding male physical educator my senior year at UNLV, where I graduated from. So I turned it around.
Wow, what a major accomplishment.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about your parents.
My parents were great parents. Eddie and Josephine Nunnely were their names. I grew up in a Christian home.
Which means?
Which means that we were taught. Okay, we went to church, we went to Bible class. Back in the old days, you went the Bible class in the morning on Sunday, church on Sunday morning. We would go back to church on Sunday night. Wednesday night Bible class. My father was an elder of the church. He was a Bible class teacher, so we were there all the time.
Had no choice.
Had no choice.
What was your biggest complaint?
Is having to sit there for hours and listen to the minister and listen to my Sunday school teacher. Oh, geez! But it was looking back on it.
Yes.
It really molded my character more probably than anything else, because and during those days, parents believed in spankings.
Oh, yes.
Now I tell young people nowadays that if they had the same laws that we have now, my parents both would have been in prison for life.
Yes.
You know, but it was the best thing in the world for me at that time, and my brothers and sisters, they kept us in line, and I'm so glad they did what they did to keep us in line.
Now going to church and studying the Word, and we all know that at church there's some nice-looking women that attend church. They're looking for some good, wholesome men. Did anyone catch your eye out of the church?
There was one young lady. She lived in another city, so I would only see her on Sundays.
Oh, okay.
And she caught my eye, but we never got anything going because of that.
The distance factor.
The distance, yeah. She lived in Pasadena, actually.
Oh, okay.
And
up the block or down the road, huh?
Yeah, it was a little too far away, and I had no transportation. So, but that was just part of growing up.
Yeah. So let's move on. After high school, you decide to.
Then I went to Citrus Junior College because of my grades were poor coming out of high school. So I went to Citrus, played there 2 years. was a co-captain, played fullback there. I didn't go both ways in Citrus.
Who was the coach?
John Strikula.
What'd you get from John? What did John teach you?
Disciplinarian. Disciplinarian.
In what way when you say disciplinarian?
Well, he had certain rules. And if you broke the rules, if you didn't do the things that you were supposed to do, he kept you in great shape because he worked us out to get into shape. But the biggest thing from him was discipline. He was the kind of coach that also communicated well with his players, and that we'll probably get into that more as we go along. But that is so important, just the communication. Whether you're a coach, a businessman, a salesman, whatever it is, communicating with people is so important.
Now you say he stressed discipline. He's a disciplinarian.
Right.
Was there anything that you had trouble with as part of that discipline?
No. Because I had discipline at home.
Right.
So, I mean, it was easy for me.
You brought it from home,
Exactly.
which it became probably a bit less challenging maybe to some other players.
Yeah, and it did. And you can tell, I can remember, and I'm not going to say his name, but I can remember a good friend that I went to high school with at Monrovia that also went to Citrus, grew up without a father in the home, really had some issues with discipline.
And accepting it from someone.
Accepting it because he just didn't have that male figure in his life, and it made all the difference in the world. He still got a scholarship from Citrus to college, but you could tell the difference that he struggled with.
Not as polished as what he could have been.
Exactly, exactly.
So, all right, from Citrus, any game stands out in your mind? Anything? Tell me about a loss at Citrus that you learned something from.
Well, I tell you, again, it's always that rivalry that you remember the most, and our rivalry was Saddleback College down in San Diego. We played them at their place, and we were playing for the Mission Conference Championship. Again, one of those situations where now we are in the lead. We have a chance to beat them. There's about probably 2 minutes to go in the game. We have the ball. The tailback, actually, I'm not going to take the blame for it. The tailback fumbled the ball. They recovered it, and they ended up marching it down to win the game, and that was tough. That was a tough game on the road. It's a game. Come so far. All we had to do is win that game, and we're in the JC playoffs.
Now, what was the atmosphere in the locker room like?
Everybody was down. I mean, it's anytime you lose. Now, I've been on both sides of the coin as a player, as a coach. But when you lose a battle, it hurts more when you lose a game that you know you had a chance to win. That hurts worse than just getting your tails beat. And if you get your tails beat, you just know you weren't.
Bad day.
Bad day. They were the better team. But when it's even and it's close and you lose that game when you know you should have won, that hurts more than anything.
Stays with you a little bit longer,
It does.
So now it's sort of ironic that this major game would be San Diego, and eventually you would go back to San Diego, but we'll get into that. Let's move on. In your journey in life, after that, then what?
Well, then I earned a scholarship to UNLV from Citrus. I went to UNLV. And again, it's one of those situations that, like I said, my Christian background probably helped me get through a lot of things. My sophomore year at Citrus, I came down with tonsillitis. And I lost something like 20 pounds during the season. And when I came back, I missed 4 games. And when I came back, the guy who replaced me, who was a hell of a football player, had beat me out, basically. But fortunately for me, the coaches knew that, hey, this is my sophomore year. You know, I have a chance to get a scholarship. They played us both, and which was good for me because I was able to get on film. So the recruiters could come in and see me play. So
that means they had a lot of respect for you too, because some coaches might have just said you lost out and we're moving on.
Exactly. And I was one of the co-captains on the team, so I think that kind of helped as well. I earned the respect of the coaches as a leader as well as a player. So we alternated, and once the season was over, I didn't get a scholarship. I wasn't offered a scholarship. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. And fortunately, that spring in April, when coaches go out to the colleges to look for players they might have missed, but they're also looking at the next class coming out.
And whatnot.
UNLV was one of the schools, and Cal State Fullerton actually was the other school that were looking for a running back that that didn't have a scholarship to go somewhere. So fortunately, UNLV saw film on me. They brought me up for a visit to UNLV. First time in a plane, first time to Las Vegas.
What is that like? I mean,
That
what
was
was that?
oh, that was scary. That was so scary. And now it wasn't that long of a flight from
Right.
from here to Las Vegas, but it was my first time, and I was 19 years old, I guess, at that time, and never had flown. So that was an experience.
What did your parents think? What did they say to you?
Well,
Or did they come along? Was it just
No,
you
just
on that
me.
plane?
Just me. Yeah, and but it was a great opportunity that late into the year where I was still able to get a scholarship, and that was, again, that was God.
So that's
there's
an
no
important
question.
message to young people or anyone that's watching this show, to never give up
Yes.
in your quest and your desire. So was your vision to be a pro player?
Yes.
Or was it just college?
No, I thought I was going to be good enough to play in the National Football League. And when I went to UNLV, I ended up competing for the position. And I found myself, again, alternating with another guy, which was part of the deal. And but it was a great 2 years.
Now, how were you accepted? You're a California guy coming up to Vegas now. You think you got it going on?
Well, the great thing about it, there's probably more Californians on that team than there were Nevada kids. So it wasn't an issue.
No,
And believe me, that wasn't an
okay,
issue.
okay.
And, because they recruited
From all over.
From all over, and primarily California.
They feast more in Southern Cal.
Yeah. So it was an issue. And some of my best friends to this day are guys that I played with at UNLV, and it's those long-lasting friendships that you get because of that environment that you're in as a player. You become tight. You're all fighting for the same goals and so forth, and you become a lot closer. So it was a great experience.
So moving forward, suddenly the last game is played, the season ends. And then what do you do next?
Well, I had one more year to finish up school because I had started so poorly at Citrus that I had to go another year before I could graduate from the university. So at that point, this is how I got into thinking about coaching. I really missed the game. When spring ball came around, I was done with football.
Right.
But I went to the head coach, at that time was Ron Meyer, who was the head coach, and I asked him if I can just come out and help in some capacity to be around football. And he agreed. The running back coach there was a really good coach, ended up coaching in the NFL a long time. So I helped him, learned a lot from him. Jim Anderson was his name.
Okay.
And he just retired from the NFL, I think it was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So he was in the National Football League 20-some odd years. And he was a hell of a coach. And that's why that influenced me.
What was his key to his survival in the NFL?
Probably he was a good teacher. And we'll get into that probably more. But I think the key to be a good football coach is you got to be a great teacher. It's not about yelling and screaming, kicking them in this type of deal, intimidating kids. You got to be a good teacher. And Jim was that, and that's one of the things I learned from him when I got into coaching that I carried on through my coaching career.
So it mentored in a sense, huh?
Yeah, and I wasn't a graduate assistant. I was, again, just a student out there just trying to figure out whether I wanted to. Just figure out if I wanted to coach and what I had to do and that type of thing. And while I was finishing up my classes, and I finally finished up, graduated from UNLV, and that's when I decided that's the direction I want to go.
What your parents think of this? You want to be the coach? You went to college and you want to be a coach?
Well, my parents, anything I wanted to do, I think they would have been happy. They were just happy to see me graduate from college, first in the family to graduate from college, and whatever I wanted to do. They knew I loved football.
Okay.
So that was no problem.
Why this burning love for football?
What do
you get from it? What is it?
Well, it's just the competitiveness of sport. Whether it's football, I played basketball, shot put it, actually in track. And it just the competitive sports I loved. I always loved to be in a competitive sport. And that's what egged me on to become a coach, because I could still stay in a competitive sport, but now be on the sideline instead of out on the field.
All right, so why can some great players not be great coaches?
Well, that's the thing. You got to have a passion to be able to teach. Not everybody can teach. Not everybody can motivate someone else to be able to get them to be at their very best. I think that's a special skill.
Is the style of motivation? What is the technique that you have that makes you such a sought after individual in the NFL? What were you bringing to the teams that they say, wow, he's got the guys doing this here? Teaching
And communication. Those were the two things I learned that were going to be important for me to be successful in the business. There are other things that involves in contacts and that type of deal, but the thing that I thought I brought to the game of football was to teach the skills to play the game, and then also to communicate with my players in a way that I was always positive. My coaching philosophy as I got into coaching over a long period of time is to teach, correct, and praise. Those were the two things that I learned that you got to be able to master in coaching. And what I mean by that is you got to be able to correct the mistakes. I'm always looking for perfection. And I think
very observant.
And you have to be as a coach, okay, to get your guys to play well.
So
and
what do you do when a player comes in, highfalutin, he's been doing this since Pop Warner, and you see that this ain't gonna work in the NFL. You're gonna have to change it. How do you get inside that person's head to let?
You bring him into your office. This is what I've always done. Again, it comes down to communication. If you have a communication with that young man that he understands, I know who you are, what you're about, and so forth, but you got to understand that this is a team sport. And you got to be able to sacrifice your glory or whatever your ambitions are and your goals, which are good, and I want you to attain them, but you're part of a team. And what you do is going to affect the rest of these guys, the other 10 guys that you're playing with. So it can't be just about you. It's got to be about team. And I will help you to be the best player that you can possibly be. I'll help you to be as good a shape as you need to be, as skilled as you need to be. But all I ask for you in return is to be able to communicate with your teammates and be a leader out there.
Now, has sport shifted from that?
Yes, it has. And I got to be real.
Walk the thin ice.
Yeah. It's so different now than it was when I coached for 36 years. It's so different than it was 30 years ago, the players that have come in. And I tell people this way, the kids of today are different than they were 20 years ago. That's how you can relate to what I'm saying. Things are different than they were, than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And the same kids who are out there in the streets, gang banging and so forth and so on, those are the same kids that we have in the NFL and college. Not necessarily gang bangers,
to that extreme.
but there is a attitude about me. I want to, you see it in pro sports all the time. They got to get on and celebrate and so forth. It's a team game.
Right.
It ain't about you.
Right.
It's a team game, and that really bugs me when they take all the credit. It's me. Well, there's 5 guys up front, if I'm a running back, that block for you to be able to get where you got.
Well, that's the same with a coach.
Yes.
And assistant coaches.
Yeah.
He may get the glory and the credit, but those assistant coaches play a major role in prepping the players to do what they need to do, right?
No question. Every head coach that I've ever worked for, every head coach I'm sure in football, in the history of football, know their worth is only as good as the people that work for them. Their assistant coaches are the most important people on his staff. Okay, because they're the actual teachers. The head coach is just the man that is in charge of the program.
CEO.
He's the CEO. But you got to have good lieutenants and generals and sergeants and privates and so forth. You got to have good people that's going to be able to teach the people that's going to play for you.
Now, have you ever had a player that had a issue with the head coach, and you had to pull him to the side?
Oh yeah.
And break it down to him that this is what you need to do.
Right.
And this is not the proper way of dealing with it?
Yeah. It depends on what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Either I will say you need to go talk to the head coach and let him know how you feel about it. Okay. If it's something that I know the head coach will not discuss with him, maybe it's a discipline problem that this particular kid has, and that's why he doesn't look like the coach, but he's not doing the right things. So I need to tell him, you've got to be able to fit within the system. The system's not going to fit for you.
Not going to change.
It's not going to change. You got to understand that. So the head coach is just like your daddy. Your daddy ain't going to change. He's been who he is for 50 some odd years. You've got to change to him because he's in charge.
And some people can adapt to that?
Most do. Most guys do, and again, you got to bring them in and talk to them about it. You can't, as a position coach, you can't ignore it and just think that it's going to take care of itself. That's the one thing I learned in my experiences in coaching, and I think it's in life, is that when there's somebody struggling with whatever it is, whatever issue they have, they need somebody to be able to bring that problem to and sit down, discuss it, and listen, and not just preach to them, but you got to listen to what they're saying. And then you got to find a way so that young man can understand, okay, this is what it is. It's always going to be this way, but this is how you can deal with it. And that's the thing that I think coaches do.
Now, how important is, this might sound ridiculous, but as one professor told me, there's nothing ridiculous unless you don't ask it or say
Exactly.
it. Reading and writing in the NFL. Is that an important tool to know to have?
No, it's not. Now we have playbooks, and I think everybody's heard of playbooks, that has the plays that are written in there. Now the plays itself are drawn, okay? You can see where you're supposed to go and who's got to block, whomever. And then you have the actual writing the verse of what your assignment is all about. And so, but still, you only got to worry about your position. So all you got to do is read what you're supposed to do and see the diagram and, to know what you got to do.
The reason why I asked that, because you hear some players being cut because they couldn't follow the plays. They didn't know the playbook.
Well,
Were they not disciplined enough, or what?
That's it. Because there's no reason why you can't learn what your job is. That should never be an issue. You can be a player that doesn't read real well, but that's why we have diagrams, and that's why we have explanations that's going to tell you what to do. But on top of that, me as a position coach, if I know I have a player that have a problem in learning the offense or learning the defense, again, I got to bring that kid in and spend time with him so that he learns what he has to do. You just got to spend extra time.
You ever been rejected by a player?
No. And I think
you say that emphatically.
There's no question. I've dealt with a lot of different personalities. Matter of fact, when I first get to a new staff, in my first meeting with the players that I have, and I don't know any of them.
Right.
But the first thing that I'll tell them, I'll say, I've coached you before. I've coached you before. Different name, okay, different personality, okay, but I've coached you before. I know what you're about. Whatever you've done in your career, I've coached before. So I know how to deal with you because I've dealt with you before, okay? And that's how I let the players know. There is nothing under the sun that I haven't seen, especially in the latter days of my coaching career. I've seen it all. So don't come in here BSing me, because I've seen it before. And it doesn't take me long, because of my experience in coaching, to learn personality traits. If I see a certain trait out of a player, I know instantly what kind of person he is. Now, I might not be 100%, but I've seen that personality before. So my experience tells me how to deal with you.
All right. I'm glad you said that, because then it becomes, when do you bring the fire as the coach? Some players you have to heat them up, and some players they don't need the yelling, they don't need the heat. How do you gauge that?
And again, that just comes from experience, knowing that kid's personality, because I've coached him before. So if this kid is the type of kid that you can't yell and scream at to get him going, you got to find another way to motivate him. And my way of motivating him is bringing him in my office. Okay. Or behind the huddle, or behind everybody else, and whisper in his ear, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that. But I have to know my personnel. I got to know them personally, what motivates them, and what certain players you do have to scream and yell at, because that's the only thing they know to get them going. And I got to find out that's his personality. And it usually doesn't take me long. But a kid who doesn't like being yelled at, I pick that up real quick.
They'll shut down fast.
He'll shut down fast. And the first time I see that, okay, I know how he is.
Now, as an assistant coach, you have coaches up under you, right?
You might have a graduate assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And usually they are more in the back room, cutting up tape and breaking down film and that kind of stuff. They're not as active
one-on-one.
Yeah, as the position coach. It's really a position coach's job to work with the players. I was a grad assistant at UNLV at one time, so I know what my role was at that time. The position coach, they're his guys. I was just assisting him with breaking down film and so forth. So and there's some young guys who don't know any better. So if I have a GA that's helping me and he's getting into my territory, I let him know right now. I'll handle that.
All right, if you just turned on the TV set, or you're listening on the stream, or whatever young folks got going on now, you're listening to Conversations with Ralph Walker. I'm honored to interview Coach Wayne Nunnely out of Monrovia High School, on to the ranks of the NFL as a coach. All right, now there's some viewers out there that's probably think, this is a black guy sitting here talking about he was coaching the NFL. How did that work out in a sense? Did you ever have any issues? Did you have any folks that are giving you the second look?
Well, Ralph, let me again go back to college real quick and just give you another example of my experiences. I was fortunate enough, blessed enough, to become a head coach in college at UNLV, my alma mater. And I was only the fourth in the history of the NCAA to become a head football coach at a major university. So from that experience that I had as a head coach for 4 years at UNLV, it gave me a lot of recognition where Wayne Nunnely's name was out there because I had that head coaching experience. The one thing that you learn in coaching, and probably in any business, a lot of times it comes down to who you know. And so with any kind of name recognition that you can get as a coach, that's important, especially if you're considered a good football coach. That goes miles and miles.
More positive.
A lot more positive to be able to get the thing that people probably don't realize well, maybe people do, because they hear about coaches getting fired, the coaching staffs getting fired. They don't, I think most people don't understand now, it doesn't just affect that coach who gets fired. It's his assistants, they also get fired, but even beyond that, his wife, his kids, the whole family suffer, because now dad's without a job, and if they don't retain him at that university or NFL team, he's got to go find another job. And that could happen. You know, I know some coaches that I know have resumes that have like 15 different colleges or NFL teams. I mean, that means they've moved that many times in the coaching profession. So
there's no job security in the NFL.
There is no job security unless, even if you're winning. I experienced when I was with the San Diego Chargers, we go 14-2 with Marty Schottenheimer as the head coach, and he gets fired. And I don't want to get into the reasons and so forth, but he gets fired, and that's one of the things that you would think, a guy that wins 14 games and only lose 2, gets fired, but it happened. It might have been the only time in the NFL it ever happened, but it did happen. So there is no job security. You got to know that when you get into this profession of coaching, you're going to get fired, and not necessarily you as an individual, but the whole staff. When the head coach gets fired, the whole staff gets fired.
Over.
Yeah, so you got to look for another job.
So as a African American coach that's thriving and doing well, did you have any issues, any battles that you had to deal with? Because that's just part of the fabric of America. To say or think otherwise would be ludicrous, right?
Right. You know, I can honestly say, or I should probably put it this way, I didn't care.
No.
If somebody didn't like me because of my color, or they had a various complaints about my personality or whatever they didn't like, I really didn't care. And the reason I felt that way, because I know I did my job, and I took pride in doing my job. There are some issues that I've had, but usually when I have an issue with somebody, then I can remember one situation where one of the other coaches that I was working with kind of stepped into my area when he shouldn't be. I coached the D-line, you coached da-da. Don't come. I after practice.
Yes.
I went into his office, and this is the way you have to handle things.
Right.
One-on-one. I went into his office, closed the door, and explained to him, you know, you don't come into my area.
Right.
This is what I do. Now, whether it was a black and white situation, I don't think so. He was just stepping into an area which he had no responsibility to step into. So that's the way I handle things. I didn't look at myself as a black coach. I looked at myself as a good coach.
Okay.
And my work on the field, will be able to let those who observe me that I'm good at what I do. I wanted my work to show what I was about.
All right, so that's a good lead-in, a segue into the locker room mentality. And the situation with Miami and Incognito and the other player, Martin, I believe it was. What is the, can I say, the code of conduct in the locker room? Is it totally free-spirited and the coaches just sort of step back? Or as a coach, do you observe what's going on and wonder, we don't want this culture to develop? Or what? Or do the players just totally run it? Or what?
You know, I think that was I know it was an isolated situation there in Miami. That's not the norm in the National Football League. We as coaches, the only time we actually go into the locker room is to talk to a certain player about if he's having an issue, if it's something that you want to encourage him about or something you want to correct. Those kind of things. It's nothing that you don't hang around the locker room to see what the guys are doing. You know, that's their domain. And if there's ever a problem, usually the equipment guys, the trainers, they see everything because they're right in that vicinity of the place.
And they probably reported to the head coach.
And they definitely. So it's not something that we police in the NFL. It's nothing that we police the players. I mean, they're grown men.
Right. So how does that impact putting the game on the field? If you have a culture like that in the locker room, it's got to impact playing, right?
Yeah. Well, you as a coach, if you recognize that there's an issue, then again, this goes to either the head coach, the coordinator, or the position coach. Depending on the severity of the problem, it will go down the command ladder, I guess you could say. But, you know, in my experience, in my 36 years of coaching, there's really not been too many issues amongst teammates that they can't solve themselves, that where the coaches got to get involved.
Because bottom line, they want to win.
They want to win.
That's why they're in the NFL, right?
Exactly. So, and again, I want to emphasize these are grown men. So they know how to conduct themselves. They know they've been in locker rooms all their lives.
Wait a minute. There's been a few characters in the NFL
Yeah.
that you say grown men, but their mentality off the field has been immature.
Well, you can walk out this studio and you can find mature young men and some real knuckleheads. So that's just, they're no different.
Just because you put on the helmet, they got an emblem.
You know, they're everywhere. Just because you're in the NFL doesn't mean you're mature and all those things. You know, it's just something. They're individuals, and they're going to be themselves. And we as coaches, when we find that there's an issue with a kid, that's when you got to pull him in and talk to him. You got to be their dad. You know, I've been a father to a lot of young men in my lifetime, and some of them it worked out beautifully, and others they were gone.
Just didn't listen.
Didn't listen. You know, and that's the thing I loved about coaching, is to get that kind of camaraderie, the respect from your players, that he can come talk to me about anything, or if I see that there's an issue, he's not himself. That's my job now, to find out what's wrong with that young man.
What are some of the issues that may come up with a
Well, he's having personal.
First time in the league, he got this huge paycheck. He's got all the material stuff you could think of.
It's usually problems not associated with the money. It can be, but for the most part, it's relationships with his girlfriend or his wife or his parents or his uncle who wants to borrow $50,000 to be able to start his own business, and he has no clue about business. I mean, those kind of things that players got to deal with, that sometimes they need advice, from the coach.
The entourage?
Well, again, they're grown men. They're grown men.
We touched on that. They're not all grown men.
Well, what I'm saying to you, they've got to make adult decisions in their lives. Because I don't know what they do once they leave that building. I don't know. I don't hang out with them, or anything like that. So whatever they do outside of the facility, they're grown men.
So
they've got to. I don't get involved with their personal lives unless they come to me and have a concern or just need some advice.
Or you detect something.
Yeah, and that's usually because of the way they are, their body language, their attitude or something. You know something's wrong. It's just like with your kids.
So you are able to approach them, and if they extend that hand,
then I can help them.
You can help them.
Then I will help them.
Bothered.
Yeah.
Now, being a good coach, and you've stressed on that, what has been your biggest challenge, you as a person, you as a man coaching? What has been your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge, again, it becomes the relationship you have with the players, especially if it's a player that you're not reaching. That was the most difficult part for me, where he doesn't like me, and I don't particularly like him either.
Okay.
The
twain won't meet.
And that's the hardest thing to deal with, because, especially when it comes down to, I don't like him.
Oh.
Now it's affecting me and my coaching this young man if I don't like him. And it's not, it's more probably to do with his mindset, his effort. If it has something to do with his job of playing the game, that's when I have a problem with him. If it's a personality conflict, I can deal with that.
Step away from that.
I don't bother. That doesn't bother me. If he's just different, we different personalities. It's just like having a boss that you're working for that you just don't like his personality. He's on you hard all the time, but you got to deal with him because you're working for him.
So have you ever had a player that you just didn't get along with?
Yes.
And then something clicked and you both just meshed?
Yeah, and I've had that happen. And again, it's patience on my part.
And that's what you learned from it?
Yeah, it's patience on my part. And that's it's from experience. You learn through experiences with those personalities, and if you deal with those different personalities over a long period of time, you recognize this is the issue, and either you bring him in and talk to him, or if he's one of those kind of kids, he's not going to listen to whatever you say, then you got to let it go.
All right.
But as long as you do your job on the field and do what you're supposed to do, then we're fine.
Now, do you have any rituals that you go through? How do you prep before the big game? What do you say? You don't practice all week with them, and then it's that day.
Nah.
It's the game. It's Sunday. What is that like in?
You're talking about with the position players that I'm responsible for?
Right.
Usually by game day, all you've had to teach, all you've had to do in motivating them, and a lot of times, some players, again, personality, some players you don't have to say nothing to. Mm-hmm. They get themselves ready, and that's what you prefer, is for them to get ready. But if there's certain player that is clowning around in the locker room when everybody else is into it, mentally trying to focus, again, you got to, that's one of those situations where you don't grab him at that time.
Right.
But that Monday, when we come after the game, that's when you got to bring him in and explain to him, you know, you can't do this. You can't act that way. And again, it's one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. That's the thing I learned over my experience, is one-on-one, because if you talk to someone in front of all their friends and
put them on Front Street,
then you're going to have a problem, because they're going to buck then, because you're embarrassing them in front of their peers. So the thing I learned is bring that young man in a situation where he's not feel like he's cornered.
Right.
Okay, he doesn't have to fight back now. He's going to listen to you, and you explain to him why you want to act this way. There's other people that's trying to get themselves ready to go. They don't appreciate you clowning when they're ready to get themselves ready to go play. So again, it's a communication. It's a one-on-one. You know, certain guys, people are people, and professional players are no different than any other person that you know. But it's my job as the coach to be able to find a way to relate to this young man the behaviors that he has to have to stay in this environment. And I always try to make sure players understand now, this NFL, it ain't forever.
NFL, not for long.
Not for long. So if you keep acting this way, okay, you're going to find yourself back out on the street. And that's not where you want to be. So you either got to change your attitude, or you're going to find yourself back at home.
All right, now we know drugs play a tremendous role in society. Mm-hmm. What about in the locker room? How do you deal with a player that you might sense, this guy's on something, or this guy's been smoking something? Do you approach them about that?
No, because that's not the avenue to deal with that. It's not the situation you want to be in to deal with that at that time in the locker room. Again, where all of his players, his teammates probably know.
Yeah.
They all know. It's something that is hard to hide. So you deal with it the next day after the game or something like that. Again, because they're men, I keep going back to this, because they're men,
and I'll debate you on that.
You got to still respect them as a man.
Right.
And to belittle them, embarrass them in front of their peers is the worst thing you can do. It's no different than your child or a student or whatever. You got to find a way to communicate with that person one-on-one, with no one else around, where you can communicate, where they feel relaxed and they can then speak what they have on their mind.
Now the NFL is always very interesting on its product. And the product is a squeaky clean image and winning. Mm-hmm. What do you learn from losing?
Well, the thing that I learned from all the head coaches I work for, from being in the business for so long, is the thing that you learn from losing, you got to be more focused on what helps you to win. What are the things, what are not the things that you're doing that you have to do better to win? If you got to put more time on certain techniques, so much time on group periods where they're working the plays together. There's a number of things that you can find to work on. And I've been in a situation before, as a staff, we come in and we talk about, we're losing, what can we do better, what we can do better. Well, there's really not a whole lot more we can do. It might be because you don't have as good of players.
Bottom line, huh?
It can come down to that. It can come down to you're out-coached, okay? Somebody just did a better job coaching. Injuries could be a part of you losing. The one thing that I can tell you in the National Football League that I learned early in my coaching career, if you don't have a good quarterback in the NFL, you're not going to win.
Bottom line.
Let me put it this way. You're probably not going to get to the Super Bowl. Okay, you can win. You're going to win some games, I'm sure, because you got a great tailback. Okay, but I can put 8 people in that defensive line, or 8 people on defense to stop that guy back there.
Right.
Okay, but if I have a good guy back there and the guy that's taking that snap and can throw it and get it down the field, then you're going to win games.
So if you do betting out there and you don't have a good quarterback, take a tip from the coach.
Exactly. In the NFL. Now, in college, in high school, you might get away with it, but not in the NFL. I've learned that.
Now, how do you define victory to you? What is victory to you?
Victory, the sweetest thing about victory, okay, and especially to me, the sweetness of it, if you win a game that you're not supposed to win, just kind of opposite of what we were just talking about. To beat that team that's on paper is supposed to be better than you, okay, but you beat that team. I think that's the biggest high that a coach gets, is when they can beat the opponent that's supposed to be better than them. That's, to me, you beat the team that you're supposed to, no big deal. You're supposed to.
Right.
But to beat that team that you're supposed to be outmanned, they're better, they're better coached, so forth and so on, and you beat that team, that's a great feeling. That's the biggest high you can get.
Okay. All right, Coach. Everybody's saying, boy, you're great on the field. Very lofty experience and position in the NFL. How do you carry all that to home? Now, you're married, you have 4 children.
4, yeah.
How did you raise them like a coach?
No. In all honesty, and I think every coach in football, not just in the NFL, but I give my credit to raising my children to my wife, because we're not at home very much, unfortunately, in our business.
Right.
I'm kind of I love my kids. They know I love them. I do for them as much as I can do, but on a day-to-day basis, in terms of their emotional needs, they get that from mom. And I think every coach would say that, because dad's not there all the time. I mean, we put in 14, 15 hours a day during the season.
Very demanding as a coach.
Very demanding, and it's 7 days a week during the season. That's what people don't understand. We don't have a day off. The players get 1 day off. The coaches are there 7 days a week, and that's throughout the season. And in college, when you're done,
how many hours in a day?
It'll probably be Monday. I'm talking about the NFL. Right. Monday through Thursday. You're going to come in by 7. You might not leave until 11, 12, 1. I've left at 2 in the morning sometime because I had work to get done, and I didn't get it done in time. Wow. So you're going to put in at least a 10, 12, 14-hour day. And
your wife's name is?
Velda.
Okay. Monrovian also?
Fishers are
Yes.
They're in Monrovia.
Yeah.
She was here till the third grade, and then their parents moved away, but they have a lot of family here. The Fisher family is big here.
The psychology of the game, from the field over to life, does it separate?
There's a lot of similarities, and like I said, I think when I talk about when you communicate with football players, no different than communicating with your student if you're a teacher, or if you're a supervisor, the people that work for you. Football is a people's business. It's a people business. You got to know how to communicate with people to get the best out of them. And so I think the things that I learned in coaching, I can take that into any field, to be a supervisor, say, in any field that I would have the opportunity to work in, because of the people skills you develop as a coach. And I think the coaches that are successful are the people that can communicate with young people.
All right. Now, with your experience and your journey, which has been a long run, have you ever thought about writing a book?
You know, several people have said that to me. I've had experiences of, well, let me cover two things with you, and it's in that area what you're talking about. When I was a young coach, one of the things I admired the most of other coaches at coaching conventions, that where coaches get up and they talk about their particular area of expertise, and they're talking to a room full of coaches, okay, at a convention, a coaching convention. And I always had an admiration for coaches who could do that. And I made myself, when I was coaching in college, I called and asked a clinic if I could come in and speak at one of your clinics. You know, scared to death now. I didn't like standing in front of people, like most people get a fear of talking in front of people, but it's just something I had to push myself to do because I had such admiration for people who could do that.
Right.
And so I convinced myself that I could do it. And after doing it the first time, I enjoyed it. I got a high off of it.
So now you're hooked on it.
And I've done 20 or more coaching, and I've been asked back to come speak. And then the other challenge that I gave myself, and I think this is how you inspire yourself to go further than you think you can go. I wanted to be able to write articles for coaching magazines. And I wrote some 20-odd I wrote in coaching magazines. Okay, and got great response from the coaches that knew of the articles that I wrote. And I really enjoyed that, and being able to speak at clinics, being able to write. I actually even had an invention that I came up with that's still being sold in football now. Is a football on a stick. And
the one that holds
is the snapper. We called it a snapper, but myself and the manager for the San Diego Chargers are the ones who first sold it. I don't say we were the first who invented it, but we were the first that actually had them made, and we sold them to universities, to equipment companies and that kind of stuff. He and I were the first. So, you know,
that's a story in itself.
And it is. And look it up on Google. You can find it on there.
What do you call it?
It's called the Snapper.
The Snapper.
The Snapper.
Made somebody lose their job.
But it is one of those things. I just challenged myself to do some things that I didn't think I could do. But the only way you're going to find out is you challenge yourself to do it. And I was able to do all those things. And that's the thing that I got out of coaching is in life, is that you can do anything you put your mind to. You just got to be able to push yourself to be able to do it. And it can be done. I'm living proof of it, because I would have never thought I'd be writing articles and speaking in front of hundreds of coaches who know it as good as I do, but I was able to teach them certain technique or plays or whatever it might be. That's probably the biggest thrill of my career is those kind of things. I really enjoyed being a professional.
All right. Tell me the hands of time is moving on.
Okay.
Honored to have here in the studio, Monrovia, California, Coach Wayne Nunnely. Has a illustrious career in the NFL. All began right here in the city of Monrovia, and I think it's an honor. It really is an honor that, Coach, you had a dream, you had an inspiration, you had a desire to achieve something, and I think you said it all when you said, challenge yourself.
Yes.
And to the young people out there and the young folks out there, you're never too old to challenge yourself, because all is within.